Hi everyone, thanks for coming today on the webinar on degree apprenticeships and what the changes will mean for employers. I'm Emma Sellers and I'm the Communications Officer at Cogent Skills, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm delighted to say I'll be joined by Roby, Strategic Apprenticeship Lead at Cogent Skills, who is taking you through today's webinar. Rachel is very experienced in the world of apprenticeships. She's completed a number of apprenticeships since she left school and then became an apprenticeship assessor herself since 2007/8, and she has since worked in colleges, training providers with an employer provided, and most recently a trade association. So before we get started, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping rules for the webinar and how it's going to work. There's quite a few of us on this session, so the lines are all on mute. If you do, however, have any questions during the presentation, please do send them through just using the question box, which would be in the corner of your screens. We have time at the end to go through them and a little Q&A session, so we can do that then. This session, as I said, is being recorded, so a copy of that will be made available to you. So without much else to say, I'll just hand over to Rachel and we can get started.
Hi everybody. Yes, thank you Emma, thanks for the introductions. So as Emma said, thank you all for joining today's webinar. This is a webinar following workshops that we ran in the summer with regards to the degree apprenticeship consultation, and what I wanted to do is when the report and the outcomes came out was wanted to come back to you all and provide you with an overview of what has been agreed as part of the consultation outcomes, and just to go through what the Institute have recognised and what the Institute are going to do in recognition of some of the concerns that have been raised. So just a bit of a brief introduction about Cogent Skills. So we are a charity that support employers in the science industry, and we come together collaboratively to address the skills issues. We have a number of skills forums and membership groups, including SIP, Science Industry Partnership, and the NSSG, which is the Nuclear Skills Strategy Group. We also have an umbrella of other organisations within the Cogent Skills brand, which support training, endpoint assessment and consultancy. We are a charity, so all of our profits, or any profits, go back into the Science Industry Partnership arm of the business. And it's the Science Industry Partnership and the NSSG that have put this session together to represent both science and the Nuclear Skills Strategy Group partners. So just a couple of objectives just to run through. So what I wanted to do was to provide you with a recap of those 5 proposals that were announced in the summer consultation, provide you with an update on the outcome of the consultation, and provide you with some helpful tips for staying up to date with standards activity. So just to set a bit of background and give you some headlines. So the consultation was published in the summer and it closed in September 2021 after receiving 208 responses, which is a very positive response rate. The final report was released on the 16th of December with a headline of full steam ahead, moving forward with the policy, and that the consultation responses provided an overwhelming in favour viewpoint to implement all the 5 proposed changes. They did acknowledge there was a number of important issues raised. Those type of concerns included the practicalities of alignment and integration, how to undertake compliance monitoring, and how to build independence into the assessment. So what the Institute have said through their report is the report and the publishing of the response is just the start of the process. And over the upcoming months, there will be further guidance, support materials, and information that will obviously be available to view. Those guidance and support materials will be based on guidance for HEIs, endpoint assessment organisations, or the links, and also support materials for the Trailblazer groups to be able to undertake their redevelopment of those standards that will need to be updated, or for new standards that are being developed at level 6 and 7. Nothing has been released as yet, but obviously through the Science Industry Partnership and NSSG, once we know that things are released for public view, we can obviously make them available to you all. So just to run through, there was 5 main policy changes. Number 1 was about supporting graduate entry opportunities, and it was making it easier to include or not include a degree where a job requires a graduate level. Integration of on-the-job and off-the-job training and alignment between the apprenticeship knowledge, skills and behaviours, better known as KSBs, and the degree learning outcomes. And we've grouped 2 and 3 together because a lot of what was said in 2 would then transcribe into how 3 would have to be delivered in action. And then integration of assessment. So mandated degrees can only be assessed by the university as part or before the degree is awarded, and the participation of an independent assessor. So in a nutshell, what that means is that at the moment, there are some non-degree qualifications, there are some integrated degrees, and there are some non-integrated degrees. An integrated degree programme is a programme that is currently assessed through the university, whereas a non-integrated degree is you have your degree programme and then you go through to Gateway and go to endpoint assessment like any other level of apprenticeship at the moment. The plan is to make sure that there is only integrated degrees moving forward. And then with that, because that independence of assessment is going to be removed, they wanted to make sure that there was still some independence, so that they were proposing the participation of an independent assessor with competent and up-to-date occupational competency that would be a part of the panel that would make the final decisions on the grading of that apprentice. So just to provide a summary, so better supporting graduate entry occupation, so that was number 1. So amendments are being made to the mandatory qualification policy to recognise the currency of a degree, especially where there is no specific subject discipline requirement for entry into the occupation. And in a nutshell, and the example that we've been given over time and we've used over time is to enter the world of investment banking, you may not need an investment banking degree. You could get in with a history, geography, politics degree as an example. And what they're looking at is those mandatory qualifications that are really needed to enter that subject specific discipline. And obviously from a science point of view, it has always been the case that there is a real weight on that academic rigor and that academic knowledge that our learners need through that qualification. So what they're proposing to do is for those, so the starting point would be to not mandate a qualification if there wasn't the evidence, but they would be using a basket of evidence during the design stage, and this is the stage that the Trailblazer groups run, to determine if there is sufficient evidence to support a degree being included and to kind of make it compulsory stroke mandatory. Number 2 and 3, so the integration on and off the job and the alignment of the KSBs. So the Institute want to ensure that degree apprenticeships are designed to best support apprentices to achieve full occupational competency and ensure that the providers are delivering all the requirements. So there was feedback that obviously this is taking place. There is always and there is currently good practice out there, but there is also practice where the knowledge requirements are delivered by the university, the HEI, and that the skills and behaviours are almost left to the employers to deliver and to assess. And there sometimes isn't a lot of assessment against the skills and the behaviours. So knowledge is covered, but the skills and behaviours aren't. So they want to make sure that everything is under the responsibility of the provider, so the university, and make sure that they have full accountability of all the knowledge, the skills and behaviours. And what they also want to do with this is they want to fully align the KSB, so all of those statements that are in an occupational standard, they want to make sure that they map into the learning outcomes of the degree. And what they are saying is they will only fund what is within the knowledge, skills and behaviours. And what that means in real terms is you'll have a provider that has a course who will have to revalidate and will have to go through a process of mapping where the content in their degree courses maps into the knowledge, skills and behaviours. And then from an employer point of view, they'll be then given an outline of what is fully covered. And if there are KSBs if there are learning outcomes within the degree that aren't covered through the KSBs, if the employer wants them to be included, they will have to pay for that privately, and that won't be funded through the levy, if you are a levy payer, or it won't be funded through ESFA funding, it would be privately subsidised. And then obviously I explained just a minute ago around that integration of endpoint assessment. So degree apprenticeships will only be approved in the future if an integrated endpoint assessment is built into it. And this is to remove what has been known, and again, I will say that it hasn't been widely recognised within the science industry, but what is being recognised is that learners finish their degree programme and then don't go through to Gateway and finish their endpoint assessment. So now neither can be awarded in isolation. So the final assessment will be the degree and the endpoint assessment, and whether endpoint assessment would be included as a module or one of the learning outcomes within the programme. But to alleviate concerns, or to try and alleviate concerns, they do want to have at least one independent individual who has got occupational competency to be on that panel and have an equal voice, somebody that hasn't directly been involved in the learning of that learner to be involved in the assessment of skills and behaviours and the knowledge and the contextualisation of that development through the programme, to make sure that they are meeting all the requirements of the apprenticeship standard. So that's just a summary of what the proposals were. So I'm just going to go through one by one what has been, what the outcomes have been, which includes the response rate of support, identification of what has been raised as a concern, and then what the Institute are going to do, or what they've responded and what actions they're going to put into place. So for number one, there was a 75% response rate in support of the change, but there were concerns around the data sources, around this basket of evidence, and potentially data being backwards data, so old data, rather than looking at future requirements. So in a nutshell, they were concerned around having to obviously get this data to justify why a degree was potentially needed, and that this evidence might not reflect what the employers really want, but also that they might have to use old data that might not necessarily be reflective of now, or more importantly, future. And obviously these apprenticeship standards are supposed to be future-proofed. So the Institute have recognised, so they are saying that trailblazer groups will be free to offer evidence from sector-specific sources, and that this will be considered alongside the evidence. So this gives an opportunity for the trailblazer group, who are obviously industry employers, to be able to put their own evidence together to support their wants, desires, if they want to include a degree programme. And future proofing will be built into the standards as far as possible, but they are recognising that they will not start, and they've said the default assumption that a degree is generally required to be able to undertake an emerging or evolving occupation. So again, because of a lot of the new roles that are coming out and where apprenticeship standards are being delivered, if there isn't substantial evidence to show that a degree programme should be mandated, they wouldn't start with that starting point that it should be. So that could cause some, maybe some issues in the future, especially if there's an evolving occupation in the sector. Number two, so integration of on and off the job. So 85% of respondents supported the change, but concerns were raised around the need to have strong employer partnerships, employer, higher education institutes and professional bodies to make sure that this could be done properly and that all parties were working together. Also, the need for rigorous inspection regimes to ensure effective integration becomes the norm, and flexibility on how integration is achieved in different scenarios. So the need for that strong employer, HEI and professional body partnering is that all three parties should be coming together and talking through their ideas, sharing their concerns and working through things together. And that, to me, the second point, again, is really important around that rigour of inspection. So as you may or may not be aware of, Ofsted are now responsible for inspecting all providers that deliver apprenticeships. Historically, it only went up to level 5, but now it has increased to level 6 and 7. So there are Ofsted inspections taking place in universities that are delivering apprenticeship degrees, but this is new. early days. A lot of them are just having monitoring visits if they haven't had visits before. So again, there really needs to be that rigor and some evidence base of what is happening and what best practice is coming out of these providers, and making sure that that becomes the norm in the future. So IFE agree with all the points, which is positive, and they are going to provide further advice and guidance over the coming months around delivering apprenticeships to optimise such integration. And they are working with the Office for Students, who is responsible for the quality assurance of level 6 and 7s, and Ofsted to ensure that there is effective, but they have said, but proportionate monitoring of compliance and evaluation of quality. So again, I think it's going to be a balance and a watch and see approach as to how they want to see that rigor of KSBs and the on and off the job training actually in practice. And the other thing that I would say is there is now real recognition that employers from the Trailblazer groups do involve the HEIs and the professional bodies from the outset to try and share ideas. That doesn't necessarily mean that HEIs and professional body people will be invited to all the meetings, but it will be that they'll have a kind of they'll have a more kind of valid role in the process of designing and updating standards, rather than just seeing the draft when it goes out for consultation. And then number 3, the alignment. So 79% of respondents supported the change. And again, there was very much, again, the need for Trailblazers to involve HEIs in the development stage, greater clarity on what good alignment looks like, and to ensure such alignment happens in all cases, and the risk of aligned degrees being too narrow. So what they have said again, so talking about needing HEIs to be involved without compromising the overriding commitment for the process to be employer-led. And that was one thing that obviously we wanted to see in there, is that it does still stay employer-led, but the recognition that HEIs can come to the table, put their points across, and then maybe leave the meeting and let the employers take the steer on it. They've recognised again that there'll be more clarity and guidance to help those alignment tasks that we'll need to be doing. And there is work going on with Ofsted and OFS to make sure that that is taking place, and that there is best practice, because there are some providers that are already doing this really well. So they want to, case studies and take some best practice from other providers, and then roll that out and make sure that there are guidance and help guides to support both the Trailblazers and also the HEIs who are then going to have to align. And then the risk of aligned degrees being too narrow. So they are recognising that they understand the concern, but they do not believe that this is going to be the case if the KSBs are currently and correctly developed at the outset, and they will develop further guidance to support this process. And I will just flag that the risk of the aligned, the degrees becoming too narrow was a concern raised through our consultation and our events in the summer. So we have paid particular attention to the feedback that they've given, and we will be looking out for this further guidance. There are concerns around the narrowing of content, having to align KSBs to degrees, and there is concerns across industry about the depth of knowledge that may be lost, that then may impact the quality of the outcome for the learners in the future, and how that could impact transferability, progression onto master's/PhD courses, and also that global transferability. So it's almost a watch this space. They are saying that it shouldn't be a concern. We are feeding back from the SIP point of view that we do believe it's a concern, and we will await the additional guidance that will come out and further conversations that are taking place. Number 4, the integration of endpoint assessment. 73% responses supported the change, but the concerns were raised around the near for clear inspection and quality assurance, the need to ensure that the independence isn't compromised, and clarification around how the alignment with professional, statutory and regulatory body requirements will be captured. So again, there's a theme around the quality, and obviously this was raised throughout the consultation. So they are accepting and that they will continue to apply oversight for EQA. Obviously, with the transition of apprenticeships standards and occupational standards moving to Ofqual, there is more emphasis on making sure that there is quality assurance. And obviously universities have their own quality assurance for their degree programmes that they have to meet. So they are going to make sure, and again, provide more guidance to make sure it's fair, comparable and consistent within the EPA plan. And again, they have said that more guidance will come out. IFATE will clarify the requirements to ensure independence in the assessment plan. So there will be clear structures and clear guidance or rules given within the assessment plans to make sure that that the independence is going to be there. And the Institute are continuing to work with the professional bodies to incorporate what they require into the EPAs, and obviously what integrating will actually mean. They are recognising that there are some concerns, and there are valid concerns for professional regulation, but also for the legal requirements that some industries need, and they are recognising that, and they want to work together to try and come to a resolution. They have said anecdotally, though, that compromises will need to be made. So we are keeping an eye out of what's being said, and if there is activity on what those compromises may need to be and potentially what impact that will have. And then the final change, the final proposal was around that participation of an independent assessor. So they want to obviously make sure that 73% respondents supported the change, but they did raise that concerns including the sourcing and training of independent assessors, the need to clarify external quality assurance arrangements, and the use of an internal examiner system. So the Institute have agreed with the points relating to independent assessment, and they will build in requirements to the role and future-proof those through the assessment plan to ensure that HEIs do understand who they are expected to recruit from, what requirements they have, and how they can help, how they can build their pool with existing stakeholders. So using the expertise that's already out there, and then, you know, obviously working with those individuals to become part of their pool of independent assessors. IFATE don't believe that EQA will be an issue, as there are already changes to be accommodating within the existing system. So obviously this is related to external quality assurance with Ofqual, external quality assurance within OFS, and also the Ofsted link in to make sure that that quality assurance is in place. And they have said that they don't believe that an external examiner will be able to act as an occupational assessor for the degree, because they don't think they'll be able to assess all the assessors. So the external examiner will have a role to play in ensuring a degree apprenticeship's EPA is carried out properly in accordance with its assessment plan. But they are saying that the HEI will almost take responsibility, recruit that pool or those individual assessors, and that they will then sit on the panel and they will be a part of the process and making sure that there's clear endpoint assessment, quality assurance, to make sure that there is that independence, but also add to and make sure that the independent person and the competent person has an equal voice in comparison to everybody else that has been involved in the delivery. So those are the five areas that have been flagged with the key concerns and what they are actioning through in the next few months. So implementation, so obviously all five have been accepted. So they are, as they said, full steam ahead with the policy revisions. So there was an indication that there were concerns with the timescale. And just to set a bit of context, the timescale has been quite tight, and that is because the consultation was delayed. It was delayed through the summer. It was supposed to be out maybe June, July. So it was delayed. So there was a recognition that yes, it might all come very quickly. And obviously the report didn't come out until December. So what they have said, what the key concerns were, is obviously trailblazer groups and limited resource. Obviously, all of you that are involved in trailblazer activity know how time consuming it will be. on top of your day job. So there needs to be some recognition that these people who volunteer their time free of charge do have day jobs to do, so that all of these requirements and all of these updates that are potentially coming is going to need time. So we need to balance that time, but also the resources in the universities in order to be able to apply the changes. And one of the big things that they will need to do is be revalidating all of their degree programs currently into the new KSBs and matching it again to the assessment plan. And these things don't happen overnight and can't happen overnight. So there were concerns raised around the time scale. And then whether introducing the new policy, what impact could that have on the start this autumn? So obviously September is the biggest month of the year, September, October, when people go to university or start degree apprenticeship courses. And by introducing this policy so quickly and maybe rushing through revisions might then impact autumn starts. So what they have said and what they've agreed to is they will still allow submissions of new proposals and revised standards based on the new policy from the 16th of March submission date, but they will not require all submissions relating to the policy to meet the new policy requirements until the 7th of September. So the Institute work on cycles, they work on 8-week cycles. So what they are saying is if a standard has already been, in the process of being developed, delivered, planned, and it's ready to go, they will still be able to put that in on the old policy. If they want to use the new policy, they will be able to from March, but they are allowed to still use the old version. And there won't be a requirement to meet all of the new policy requirements until the September submission. So just for those who may or may not be interested, there has just been a submission date in January. There will be one in March, there's one in May, there's one in July, and then there's one in September. So the Trailblazer groups have got some cycles that they could go through, but obviously this only came out in December, and depending on any work that did already happen before the consultation came out, will determine just how quick any rewrites will be submitted, and if they will then fall into the new policy or not. If a degree apprenticeship is approved on the old policy, it will fall in line with its 3-year review, and at that review stage in 2025, that's when it would need to fall in line with the new policy. But obviously anything after September and anything that's been submitted after September will have to fully meet the new policy requirements. And what they've said at the end is just that they are planning to engage with stakeholders, set out the proposals in the spring, and that they are working with DfE on the review of non-qualification apprenticeships in apprenticeships as well, non-degree qualifications. So they are working, they are actively engaging with Trailblazer groups, which is good, trying to gauge, I suppose, the interest or the speed at what Trailblazers want to work. But obviously they have a resourcing limit as well, and this is a time-consuming process. So they are just working with industry to work out kind of a timeline and timescales on when these reviews will take place. And I just wanted to flag, we went out, when we did our consultation events in the summer, we asked people what the most common degree apprenticeship standards people used. And I just wanted to flag from that kind of top 12, top 13 list, which ones will be impacted as they are currently non-integrated degrees. So everything that's flagged in red will need to go through a full rewrite and bring it in line with policy. You already have your 4 in green, which are integrated degrees already. Again, they can still go through a review if they're needed to, but obviously that fundamental integration won't be applicable. And then you do have those non-degree apprenticeships that I've flagged in white, that there is further consultation taking place around them at the moment. So just a bit of a visual just to show which ones, if you weren't aware of the degree status, of which ones will be impacted. And if you obviously have apprentices on those programmes, then they are the real watching ones as to what is happening with them. And just before I finish, I just wanted to give you a couple of hints and tips and some information on where you can go to and what you can look for in regards to keeping up to date with the activity. Obviously, if you are a SIP member, then we do, through our monthly newsletter, put out quite a lot of detail when there is activity taking place. There is also a group called the SciAte group that come together quarterly that review all the activity that's happening within the health and science and with the engineering and manufacturing science related standards that we support. So if anybody wants to join those meetings, they are absolutely more than welcome. Just contact us afterwards and we can send you the invites. But from a visual point of view, you can all access the Institute of Apprenticeships website, and we can obviously send the links, share the links with them. And Emma has got the links to the revision status report that she can share. On each Trailblazer page, on each standard page, on the right-hand side, you have this yellow box. And what the box identifies is the Trailblazer contact. Sometimes this is the employer and this is the lead employer, or sometimes this might be the contact at the institute. But if you have got a vested interest and you do want to be part of the conversations related to some of these standards that are going to go through change, then you are more than welcome to email that contact and find out what's going on. There's also, in recent months, been an update to the Institute's website. And when you go onto a standard, you can see in a red box at the top of the screen if activity is taking place. So sometimes it's quite good just to be able to log on there and read if there's an update. But what the Institute have started to do, which is a really good report that comes out on a monthly basis now, is they release a revision status report. And what that report shows, it lists all of the standards that are currently going through some kind of change. Now, that just might be a funding band change, or it might just be that the occupational standards changing, or it might be a full revision. And what it does, it provides an overview of what's happening and what stage they are at. And again, we've got the links to that that can be shared. It is updated normally monthly, or if not, every 6 to 8 weeks. What you can do is filter it to health and science, or filter it to the specific standards, and it will give you that overview of where the activity is up to. So again, if you have got a vested interest, it is worth having a look at that report. Or if you want to obviously get involved in the Trailblazer activity, Trailblazer groups are always looking for employers to join. It is an employer-led process, and it's really important that employers do have a voice. You might not be able to attend all the meetings, but you will get obviously the minutes and the outcomes and any actions. But I would really recommend being part of the conversations to ensure that your views are accounted for through the next stage of through the conversations. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. Obviously, if there is any questions in the chat, please feel free to ask. And yes, I hope it's been useful for you.
Thank you for that, Rachel. There's lots of food for thought there. I'll just let you rest your voice for a moment. And whilst I do that, can I just remind everyone they can still send some questions through via the Q&A box on the corner of your screen. I know some people have sent a couple beforehand, so I'll get to those. We'll pick up any offline if we don't have time to get to them. But if it's okay with Rachel, we'll get started.
Of course.
So first of all, we have a question, which is how quickly will Trailblazers work on the changes?
Okay, really good question. So I think there's a debate going on at the moment in regard to the Trailblazer activity. Obviously, a lot of the employers sit on the same groups, so they're almost prioritising which ones to focus on first. I know that there has been some conversations already, especially around the level 6 laboratory scientist and the clinical trials specialist standard. Activity hasn't started yet, but it is going to be starting relatively soon. So again, if you want to get involved, please get in touch with the Trailblazer leads. Standards go through a 3-year review. So one of my predictions is that they will be looking at those ones that are the most out of date, and they will try and focus on those first. But again, it'll be down to the Institute, the Trailblazer group, to work out the running order of when things will be looked at.
Okay, great. got another question here, which was, will the current funding bands be reviewed when revisions are submitted?
Simple answer is yes. Whenever a standard is going through substantial change, which obviously these ones will be, they all will require to go through a funding review. There is a new funding policy that is being piloted at the moment and that will be mandatory from July. But yes, they will be required to get funding quotes, and the funding bands can change and may well change. Whether that's for the better or worse, we'll have to see what comes out of the review and the final announcement.
Okay, I've got a third question. If anyone else has anything else to add, please feel free to put it in the chat box. So are there industry concerns about the new standards?
Yes, so obviously we had some events in the summer, and the Science Industry Partnership does have an apprenticeship strategy group that come together. So with all the feedback that we had, so we had 2 really successful events in the summer, and we had a consultation with our member base through the apprenticeship strategy group. And there are concerns around the perceived perception view that an occupational degree and a traditional degree might cause in the future, and almost based as a degree apprenticeship may be regarded as a second class degree in the equivalency, and may not hold the weight that a traditional full-time degree may give. The Institute are trying very hard to alleviate those concerns, but we are still really concerned, and there are massive concerns out there that there could be an impact in the future for these apprentices that have gone through a 5-year course, come out with a degree apprenticeship, but might not be regarded in the same level against. And again, I mentioned before around that potential global transferability impact, that if degree apprenticeships are perceived as different in any way, that could be a reason that you might not take somebody on. And there's also no real clarification yet around whether or not they'll be able to move on to masters, move on to PhD courses. And again, it is early days, but it's just things that we've flagged that we are concerned about. And then there's also concerns. The Trailblazer groups were really lucky in some ways when the first set of standards came out. Policy has changed quite significantly in respect of really tightening up what is expected in the knowledge, skills and behaviours. They used to allow things to be quite loose and quite open to interpretation, but now there is very little ambiguity allowed. So one of the concerns that has been raised and is quite a passion debate at the moment is for laboratory science, as an example, that has both a chemistry and a biology degree that sits beside it, and obviously different providers up and down the country have a different degree programme within that degree apprenticeship. And at the moment that is allowed because of the looseness and the terminology that is allowed within the statements of the KSBs. This shouldn't be allowed to happen moving forward. So there are concerns around what could these standards look like in the future.
Thanks so much for that, Rachel. And I think that is all the questions now. So thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully that will provide some useful insight into some of the changes likely to impact employers. And I'd just like to say finally, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar session, and the session will be made available to you via email by tomorrow. So thank you very much, and I'll let you have the rest of your day, and I hope it's a good one. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.